imagine a world where each person understood that their only responsibility was to give and receive love and kindness? That's the question Farini asks in his book, Love Without Conditions. Good morning, Fredericksburg friends. Think of it. You wake up every morning and you say, even before having coffee, today it's my job to give love. Today is my job to be kind, to be compassionate. Farini says that unconditional love comes naturally to you. It is your nature. It doesn't take effort. Well, someone else said that to be kind, we often need to swerve from our path. And when I read that, I thought, you know, that's true for me at times, that it does take effort, that I've had to swerve from my path. And yet, wait a second, that is my path. Anthony Douglas says, kindness is not an act, it's a lifestyle. And I want to explore living that lifestyle, giving that compassion, that kindness to others, as well as to ourselves. Oh, and by the way, I'll be using kindness and compassion and love kind of interchangeably, knowing that even though they do intersect, they are different flavors. So let's go with the Dalai Lama's description of kindness as a facet of the jewel of compassion. So I got the idea for this talk last October. I'm consulting with an health system, and some of you know that I used to work there at the HIV program, and I'm working with their safety net programs, which are these wonderful programs. These clinicians offer services to people who are uninsured and underinsured. And I've been called in to do team building with staff. So I meet with the manager, with the director of the program, and based on what he or she tells me, I come up with different structures to facilitate that help them talk, share, give feedback, problem solve. And last October, I did one with a group, and I wanted to share with you what it looks like. I put up 3 continuums on big flip chart paper around the room. And of course, it was COVID time, so I had that in mind too. And I want to show you the first flip chart, what was on it. The first one has compassion for patients. And as you can see, on the continuum, it goes very low, somewhat low, high, very high. The next flip chart, which I want to show you, very similar, except this one is compassion for colleagues. Again, you can see very low, somewhat low, high, very high. And the last flip chart was this one, compassion for self. Now, I asked them to stand and I gave them different color Post-its for each one and to assess themselves on all 3. And let me show you the results. The one for compassion for patients, you can see they put towards the very high section. The one for compassion for colleagues, you can see they put that more in the middle. What did they do for compassion for self? Well, take a look. Towards the lower end. And I thought it was so interesting. You know, self-compassion has been in literature, mental health-wise, spiritual-wise, personal growth for a long time. It's been in healthcare literature since 2015. And then in April 2020, articles, and that was right after COVID started, articles appeared on self-compassion related to healthcare professionals and COVID. So we can take that off the screen right now. So what I just wanted to talk about was self-compassion. And that entails being warm, being understanding towards ourselves when we suffer, fail, or inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism, Self-compassionate people recognize that being imperfect, failing, experiencing life's difficulties is inevitable. So they tend to be gentle with themselves, as if looking through the eyes of someone who loves them. The literature reminded healthcare workers that instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing oneself for various inadequacies or shortcomings, that they're kind, understanding when they're confronted with personal feelings, feeling inadequate, being less than. Buddha said you can search the world over and not find anyone more worthy of your compassion than yourself. The Dalai Lama says that having compassion for oneself is the basis for developing compassion for others. I mean, think about it. When we build a house, we start by creating a stable foundation. Just so, when we wish to benefit others, we start by developing warmth or friendship for ourselves. Then you're in a place to kind others, perhaps kinding them without feeling like you're swerving from your path. Let's talk about kinding others. In congratulations, by the way, George Sanders quotes his speech to a graduating class at Syracuse University. Here's something I know to be true, he says. What I regret most in my life is not being poor from time to time, not working terrible jobs, not getting deathly sick that time in Sumatra when I saw 300 monkeys sitting on a pipeline, pooping in the river where I was swimming. What I regret most in my life are failures of kindness. Failures of kindness, those moments when another human being was there in front of me, suffering, and I responded sensibly, reservedly, mildly, or not at all. Winnie the Pooh said, "I don't feel very much like Pooh today." There, said Piglet. "I'll bring you tea and honey until you do." We have so many opportunities to be kind, to be loving, to be Piglet to someone's Pooh, to be Piglet to ourselves. Aware of your divine character, Unity writer Imelda Octavia Shanklin wrote, you are aware of your divine responsibility. We have a responsibility to be kind, a divine responsibility if we believe in Live Unity's second principle, that we are an expression of the divine in human form. Well, we believe that the divine is kind and loving. We believe, as Emily Cady said, that the same Christ lives within us as it lived in Jesus. Sure sounds like we believe that we are the divine in human form. So what stops us from being Piglet? What stops the goodness of our divine character automatically pouring out onto others and to ourselves? Well, we got barriers. With our pains, with our losses, with our rejections and sufferings, also come ways that we protect against them. Howard Thurman reminds us in a quote that I've used before when I've spoken to you. He reminds us that my ego is like a fortress. I have built its walls stone by stone to hold out the invasion of the love of God. So, when the world grows or feels unsafe, when life charges at us with its stressors and its sorrows, our devotion to kindness can be quickly short-circuited. We retreat to our defense system, to our fortress, fortified by fears, by needing to protect, to blame, to control, to hide as a way to navigate through those stressors. We think that to survive, we need to identify with those coverings, which become our story, our ongoing narrative. So we fortify the ego, which says, you're right, you are deficient, you better protect yourself. Ego, edging God out, holding out the invasion of the love of God. Adam and Eve were edged out, or I guess kicked out is what they say, of the Garden of Eden. One writer says that we continue kicking ourselves out of the garden. Our shame, our addiction, our weight, our attractions to people, our lack of money, perhaps neediness, making a mistake, hitting the wrong note. We judge, for we are deficient, so we don't deserve. Yeah, but if I stop judging, I'll never become the person I want to be. It's like looking into a broken mirror and believing that that distorted image is what you really look like or what the world looks like. So friends, you don't just feel shame, you are shame. You don't just feel unworthy, you are unworthy. So we deserve to be kicked out of the garden for something is wrong with us. And you know what? I'll kick myself out before you do. Oh, and by the way, I'll be kicking you out too. Contempt towards ourselves gets turned onto others. And thus our thoughts and thus our stories, which are supported, mirrored by a biochemistry of anxiety and fear, a dangerous dance between a biochemistry, all the chemicals in our body, and our thoughts as they feed off each other and help us spiral away from spirit. If your thoughts are prayers, who's praying? Your mother, your father, your sweet Aunt Beatrice, your nasty Uncle Harry, Mrs. Bradley, who said in 6th grade that you couldn't sing, so you'd be the back of the cow instead of the front in the class play. Yes, that's true. That's true. Whose thoughts are you thinking? Who is telling you that you don't belong in the garden? Who is telling you that you're not deserving, that you're not worthy, that you're not enough, or that you're a cow's ass? Who have you allowed to write your script? Just whose beliefs are you living? I'm guessing if they're a barrier to you from kinding yourself for another, they're not from spirit. Tara Brach defines radical acceptance in her book of the same name as seeing ourselves clearly and regarding what we see with an open, kind, and loving heart. And she talks about our trance of unworthiness, our feeling defective, deficient, falling short, and therefore separate from others in source. Somewhere along the road, says Joel Goldsmith, we've lost sight of our identity and begun to look upon ourselves as separate and apart from source. Course in Miracles sees separation as the only problem. Reverend Andy Carlson, in his message he delivered at the church that I go to, and it was entitled, "What Do You Want Me to Do, Lord?" And he said that those erroneous beliefs lead to a distorted thought system. And those distorted perceptions become our truth. So we don't remember who we are as we connect with others, make decisions, take actions from this half-conscious state, this trance that we are not enough, where we crucify ourselves and therefore separate ourselves from others and from spirit, the trance of the separate self. What do you want me to do, Lord? Come home, beloved. For each time you judge yourself, you break your own heart. Again, Unity's second principle, we are each of God. Based on what Unity believes about that presence, that means we're all worthy, even when we've not lived up to our aspirations, even when we've blown it, even if another has deemed us as being defective or undeserving. Toni Morrison, in her book, The Bluest Eye, her main character, Pecola, feels unworthy. And one of the characters describes the reason. All of our waste, which we dumped on her, and which she absorbed. That, of course, became her story, absorbing all the waste dumped on her by others, then living it. What waste have you absorbed? How does that show up? As a saboteur, a judge, a voice that tells you that you're unworthy? And when have you dumped that waste onto others because of the story you're living? What if we dumped our kindness instead, poured our compassion by thinking something like, what can I offer this person that might help them change their story about themselves? It might not take them out of the trance, but what can I offer that honors their worthiness for a moment? I think that at times I have unwittingly supported someone's story of unworthiness. What I regret most in my life are failures of kindness. That does not make me unworthy. It does make me human, with the choice to judge myself, smack myself, or to observe myself, to change my behavior, to choose again. Still, Roy, after 30 years of coming to Unity and doing all these messages and talks, how could you still be doing that or saying or thinking something like that? Well, self-compassion involves recognizing that personal inadequacy is part of the shared human experience. Perhaps some of you can relate to what I'm saying. It's something we all go through rather than something that happens to me, to Roy alone. We forget we're loved in our imperfection. We are within God and God is within us. Or as my Qigong teacher said, I am in Qi, Qi is in me. Tara Brock tells the story of a client, Marion. She was blind to her daughter being sexually abused by the stepfather, Marion's husband, and she was confronted by her daughter in later years. She had to deal with failing her daughter, having had a direct role in her suffering, and she felt undeserving of compassion. She also thought she had no reason to go on living. She agreed to seek counsel from a priest. And the priest drew a circle in the center of her palm and said, this is where you're living. It's painful, a place of deep hurt. It cannot be avoided. And then he covered her hand and told her, remember this, in this merciful space, this pain is held always in God's love. As you know, both the pain and the love, your wounds will heal. Tara reminds us that feeling compassion for ourselves in no way releases us from responsibility for our actions. Rather, it releases us from self-hatred and blame that prevents us from healing, from becoming clean and sober, from moving closer to our divine selves. So, not to deny her pain, not to deny that she failed her daughter, but to open her heart to Spirit's love, which contributes to self-compassion and allows the healing to begin. Richard Rohr reminds us, love what God sees in you. Friends, that's not selfish. That's not self-centered. That's part of our work in being here. To love what God sees in us means stepping out of our trance while feeling our pain, acknowledging our role or responsibility. Yeah, but if I stop judging, I'll never become the person I want to be. Well, punishing ourselves into being a good person usually doesn't seem to work. But holding ourselves with the compassion of forgiveness helps us to be more resilient so we can get back to the task. What task? Of loving, of being kind, living as the divine instead of as the unworthy, where we may project that trance of unworthiness onto others and withhold compassion for them and kick them out of the garden too. And perhaps later we think, I would have been kinder if I only knew. For modern man thinks of God instead of experiencing being God, says Eric Fromm. And it is the moments we flow with love and kindness, giving or receiving it from another or from ourselves, that we experience being that higher presence that we all hear about every Sunday. We are within God, God is within us. Now, again, we may never know the potential, the full potential impact the effect will have on another, will we? Principle 35, Miracles, Course in Miracles, says, miracles are expressions of love, but they might not always have observable effects. Some years ago, I read an article in the New Yorker that stayed with me. It's about a man in his 30s who stood on San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge one afternoon with the intention of jumping. At his apartment, he left a note. It said, I am going to walk to the bridge. If one person smiles at me, I will not jump. They dredged his body from the water later that afternoon. We can perform miracles with kindness. A smile can be a miracle worker, even with a mask on. One writer reminds us sometimes it only takes a stranger in the dark time and a dark place to make us warm in the coldest season. Kindness heals. It can transform the moment. Tara Brach goes as far as to say, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured. But again, we only have control over the offering. We don't have control over if and how it's received or what is done with it. Our job is to plant seeds without concern for the harvest, or water a seed planted by someone else. Smile at a man who's walking to a bridge and move on. Principle of miracle number 1, all expressions of love are maximal. And they transform the one who receives it as the one who offers it. Kevin Kelly on NPR's This I Believe said, kindness snares both, excuse me. Kindness snares both the stranger who is kind and the stranger who is kinded. And that when the miracle flows, it flows both ways. Accepted being kinded is as important as kinding. Sound familiar? Giving and receiving are one energy flow. Oh, he also says that we make lousy kindees. You know, I'm thinking that living a spiritual life means we've also a responsibility to accept being kinded along with kinding another, and that we've a responsibility to kind ourselves. Now, that's taking enlightened action, for that is what we believe God is constantly doing for us and with us. For when we remember our indwelling Christ, our goodness, our Buddha nature, we understand that we can't be kicked out of Eden, that we are the garden. We belong there, and so does another. Back to the team building I did with the clinical staff. At the end, I was really delighted to hear one of the physicians summarize the experience like this. It makes me think that if I were kinder to myself, I might be kinder to my colleagues and even more compassionate to my patients, maybe off the continuum passionate. Maybe. So here's one of the continuums. Compassion for self. Where might you put yourself on an average day in terms of compassion for yourself? How about on a more challenging day? Perhaps later you can explore what you need to remind yourself of to move one or more steps to the right. Just remember that when you feel this, and we can click this off now, just remember when you feel this unworthy, failure, imperfect, that this is there too. And that one small step to the right in the continuum may also end up changing someone else's life. Namaste, my precious piglets. And now, if you would join me in the meditation. Find a position that allows you to be alert and also relaxed. Close your eyes if you'd like to. Rest your hands in an easy way. Let the chair, let the floor support your body. Attend your breath. And know that each breath is a consent to living. Take a few full breaths. Allow your breath to be natural. There's no need to control the breath or fixate on it. Just a relaxed awareness. Relaxed yet alert. Allow your awareness to scan through your body and see what needs to soften. Bring a kind attention to that part of the body and soften it. Release tension. You will find your mind naturally drifts off in thoughts. You don't need to clear your mind of them. Just recognize when they're happening. Let them flow by. And then without any judgment, return to the breath. Imagine a world where each person understood their only responsibility was to give and receive love and kindness. Imagine a world where your only responsibility was to give and receive love and kindness. When we live in a trance of the separate self, we separate ourselves from others and from spirit, from offering and receiving that love and kindness. What do you want me to do, Lord? Come back home, beloved. And now go into the silence. Return to that home by regarding what you see with an open, kind, and loving heart. And as you focus on the breath, gently become aware of your physical surroundings. Look, listen, breathe into the goodness that you are. Today, my job is to give love. Today, my job is to be compassionate, to bring kindness to the moment. And so it is.